Autonomous vehicles are often presented as the future of transportation. Safer roads, fewer accidents, more efficient traffic, lower costs. And while much of that potential is real, there's another side to the story that doesn't get as much attention. Because behind the progress, there are hidden risks. Not the obvious ones people usually think about, but deeper structural risks that could shape how this technology actually unfolds. The first risk is something most people underestimate: edge cases. Autonomous systems are trained on data, millions of miles, countless scenarios, patterns that allow them to make decisions. But the real world is unpredictable. Unusual weather conditions, unexpected human behavior, rare road situations that don't happen often enough to be fully learned, a pedestrian acting erratically, a construction zone with unclear markings, a sudden obstacle that doesn't fit known patterns. These are edge cases, and while they're rare, they matter. Because a system can perform perfectly 99.9% of the time, but it's the 0.1% that determines trust, and solving those edge cases is far harder than improving average performance. Another hidden risk is over-reliance. As autonomous systems become more capable, people begin to trust them more. They pay less attention, they assume the system will handle everything. And that creates a dangerous gap, because current systems, even advanced ones, still have limitations. So when something unexpected happens, the human may not be ready to intervene. This is sometimes called the handoff problem. The system operates smoothly most of the time, but when it fails suddenly, and the human has only seconds to react. That transition is one of the hardest challenges in autonomy. There's also a systemic risk that goes beyond individual vehicles. When many autonomous vehicles operate on similar systems, they can share similar weaknesses. If a particular scenario confuses one system, it could confuse many. If a software issue exists, it can propagate across fleets. This creates the possibility of correlated failures, not just one vehicle making a mistake, but many vehicles responding incorrectly to the same situation. And that's a very different kind of risk compared to human driving, where errors are more random. Another major concern is cybersecurity. Autonomous vehicles are essentially connected computers on wheels. They rely on software, sensors, cloud systems, and constant communication, and anything connected can be targeted. If a system is compromised, the consequences are serious, not just data breaches, but physical outcomes, control of movement, routing, decision-making. So securing these systems is not just an IT issue, it's a safety issue. And as vehicles become more connected, the attack surface increases. There's also a risk tied to infrastructure dependence. Autonomous systems often rely on high-quality mapping, GPS accuracy, and sometimes communication with external systems. If that infrastructure fails, even temporarily, performance can degrade. Signal loss, map errors, outdated data. These issues may not happen often, but when they do, they can create confusion for the system. And unlike humans, who can improvise in uncertain environments, machines depend heavily on accurate inputs. Another hidden challenge is regulatory fragmentation. Different regions have different rules, standards, and levels of acceptance. Some cities embrace autonomy, others restrict it. Some countries move quickly, others move cautiously. This creates a fragmented landscape, and for companies trying to scale autonomous systems, that fragmentation slows deployment. It also creates inconsistencies in how the technology is used and understood. There's also a liability problem that hasn't been fully resolved. When a human driver makes a mistake, responsibility is relatively clear, but with autonomous vehicles, it becomes more complex. Is it the manufacturer, the software provider, the fleet operator, the owner? Determining responsibility in the event of an accident is not always straightforward, and that creates legal uncertainty, which can slow adoption and increase costs. Another important risk is economic displacement. Autonomous vehicles have the potential to replace large numbers of driving-related jobs. Truck drivers, delivery drivers, ride-hailing drivers. This doesn't happen overnight. But over time, the impact can be significant, and transitions like this are rarely smooth. They create economic and social challenges that extend beyond technology itself. There's also a behavioral shift that could have unintended consequences. If autonomous driving becomes cheaper and more convenient, people may use it more. More trips, longer commutes, less reliance on public transportation. This could increase overall traffic rather than reduce it, and it could reshape cities in ways that aren't entirely positive. So while autonomy improves efficiency at the vehicle level, it doesn't automatically solve system-level challenges. Another subtle risk is the loss of human skill. As people rely more on autonomous systems, their driving ability may decline. So in situations where human intervention is needed, performance may be worse than before. This creates a paradox. The safer the system becomes, the less prepared humans are to handle rare failures. Finally, there's the issue of trust. Autonomous vehicles don't just have to be safe, they have to be perceived as safe, and public trust is fragile. A few high-profile incidents can shape perception quickly, even if the overall system is statistically safer than human driving. Because people don't evaluate risk purely on data, they evaluate it emotionally, and that means adoption depends not just on performance, but on confidence. So what does all of this mean? It means autonomous vehicles are not a simple upgrade, they're a complex system shift. One that introduces new types of risk even as it reduces others. And that's why the timeline for full adoption is gradual, not because the technology isn't advancing, but because these hidden risks need to be managed, understood, and addressed. Because in the end, the challenge is not just building vehicles that can drive, it's building a system that can be trusted, at scale, in the real world. And that's a much bigger task than it first appears.